Hello, Lisa. Welcome to Women on Fire. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolute honour to be on your show, and thanks too for coming on mine. I really appreciated that.
Thank you for having me / us
Yeah.
again. It was really great to talk to you and also to get to know you.
Oh,
It's
yeah, and I
been
think
a
we'll be
pleasure.
friends from here on in. I think we've shared so many unfortunate experiences that we sort of had quite a lot in common, really, didn't we?
Yeah. It's actually a beautiful thing about having these chats and about interviews that you do get to know a deeper part of someone, or more so than if you went out and had coffee with them.
Exactly. Yeah, you do. Especially with these podcasts where you get to share some of your stories and your learnings and your,
Mm.
experiences that you've had, and that's the whole point, really. I'm all about sharing and, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, really.
And thank you for that, 'cause it takes guts, I think, and it can feel a bit vulnerable at times as well. But, as you know, we're about midlife and perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. But I have to say, and for those who can see it on YouTube, Lisa's book, Relentless, if you can't see it, her book is called Relentless: How a Mother and Daughter Defied the Odds. So, fortunately for me, I was able to finish this on the weekend, and I was flabbergasted, and I went through wows and tears and, "Wow, I can't believe you did that," and it's there's so many facets to it, like from your incredible endurance races to your mum having an aneurysm and suffering severe brain damage at the age of 74, and you bringing her back. That takes tenacity, and oh my gosh, it was so inspiring. And also, then you've had the grief of baby loss, and I want to ask you about that because
Yep.
menopause actually is the end of fertility. So, you know, a lot of women, and I've been there myself, have to come to terms with that, and that can be
Yep.
difficult.
Very.
So,
Yep.
can we actually how did you get into endurance training? Because racing, because you were a jeweler, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I've had many careers. I've got ADHD, I reckon, so I just keep, and I'm very curious, so I just always sort of into so many different projects, and it's been my downfall in some ways because I just love exploring new areas and diving deep into things. To answer your question about ultra marathoning, so did ultra marathons and extreme long endurance events and expeditions and that type of thing for about 25 years. Got to experience incredible, amazing things, all around the planet. So, for those who don't know what ultra endurance is, that's like running like kilometer distance, like 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers across deserts, across mountains. I've done over 70,000 kilometers in my career of racing and training, and raced a couple of thousand kilometers in the Sahara and the Moroccan desert, the Arabian, the Libyan, the Gobi in China, the Nepalese Himalayas, the Indian Himalayas, outback of Australia. At one point, I ran right through New Zealand for charity, doing 2,250 Ks in 42 days, which nearly bloody killed me.
Yeah.
And just had lots of successes and lots of failures along the way as well. And I was just really, I love adventure. I love pushing the limits. And I grew up in an environment where physical and mental toughness was very valued by my dad, especially. My dad was a very hard ass, like one of these tough old buggers. And he expected a lot from us as kids. And he was a brilliant dad, but he was tough, So you didn't, you sort of take a teaspoon of concrete and harden up was the sort of thing.
Jeepers.
And yeah. And so as kids, we did harden up, we did get a little bit tougher. And then I got into ultra marathoning actually after I'd been in a 5-year long relationship with an abusive person who
Oh
shall
dear.
remain nameless.
Mm.
in my early 20s, and he was an extremely good sportsman and athlete, and we did lots of traveling together, and we did lots of adventures, and he really showed me the world, and it was a wonderful experience from one side, but on the other side a very negative, abusive, emotionally abusive relationship. And I was never good enough, and I was just hopeless at everything, and I was just, a piece of shit
Yeah.
in his eyes, sort of thing. And as when you were young and you're in love, and he looks like Brad Pitt, you know,
Yes.
you don't know to walk away and leave. And I've never been a person to quit very easily anyway, so I'm always sort of hung in there. And he'd had a rough childhood, and I always made excuses for him, and all of that sort of jazz. But after years of being in this environment where you're constantly put down, I had absolutely no self-esteem. And this culminated when we were doing a expedition across the Libyan desert. And this was a 4-person expedition, first time that we'd actually been with other people, because we'd always traveled on our own, done everything on our own. And when we were on our own, he had sort of complete control over who I was and what I did. And this was the first time that there were a couple of other guys there in the mix. And it was led by a guy called Elvis, and that was his real name. And he was a Yugoslavian survival expert, and he was in charge of the expedition. And we had to cover 250 odd kilometres across the Libyan desert, a military barred zone. We weren't allowed to be there. It was illegal. So we had to sort of disappear into the desert. We had huge, great backpacks on our backs to carry all the water, because there was no water en route. So we had to carry enough to survive for 10 days. And we only had 2 litres of water a day, which, if anybody knows and does the maths, it's not really enough to survive in the desert. And so we were trying to get through in 7 days, but we had enough for emergency for 10 days. So we only had 2 litres of water a day. And this meant that we were severely dehydrated from pretty much day 2 of the crossing. And we were meant to be covering 45 kilometres a day to get through in that time. And with 35 kilo backpacks, like I weighed about 58, 59 kilos. So that was like 2/3 of my body weight, like just to
Wow.
walk was massive. I had to get help to get up and, things like that. And the boyfriend, we were trying to do a book, and he was a photographer, and he wanted me to help set up tripods and do this sorts of things. And Elvis said, well, you can take as many photos as you like, but we're moving and we got to keep going and you got to keep up. And the boyfriend was like, well, you got to help me do this stuff. And I'm like, I can't, I physically can't. I'm trying to keep up with the guys as it is, and just not able to. And so this ended up being a big fight. And Elvis was seeing how he was treating me, and he was like, hey man, you can't talk to her like that, and you can't do that. That's not appropriate, and that's not right. And, and started sticking up for me, basically. And
Nice.
then these 2 alpha males sort of went at it, right? That this wasn't, I'll treat her how I like, and I'll do what I like, and she's, this and that. Anyway, day 4, we were all severely dehydrated, and it's icy in the group, and we, hot environment, very icy, cold temperature as far as how we felt towards each other. And in the middle of this, the boyfriend says, right, that's it, the relationship's over, I'm leaving you, after a big blow up, and disappears over the sand dunes.
Oh, no.
And leaves me there, like, with the other guys. So I was with them, but I didn't know whether he was going to survive, or whether we were going to survive, because we were severely up shit creek. We didn't have enough water, and, it was one false step out there, twist your ankle, you're dead, right? And he disappears, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, right? And I started to fall apart, because my relationship, and I love you, and, all of that sort of crap. And then I sort of felt, hang on a minute, I'm in the middle of the Libyan desert. I can't fall apart here. I have to get my shit together. I owe it to the other guys to not cause any more problems and to get on with the job. So I promised them that I was fine, I was going to be okay, and let's just get on with it now that we're down to 3. And then everything, we worked really well as a team, and we, did well. Cut a very long story short, it was a real low point in my life, and I did survive the Libyan desert. Spoiler alert.
I don't know how.
Don't know. Yeah, it took me a long time to recover physically, because there was a lot of damage done to the kidneys and things like that. And it was pushing the limits. A couple of days later, we really ran into some big trouble, and you'll have to read the book for all of that. But what it came out of it was that, okay, I realized in the aftermath, at least, that this was a very abusive relationship and this was not okay how I was being treated, and that I had to get out. And it took me 3 years to actually get away, because it
Wow.
was not like he was, very, very, it got abusive, more abusive. And so it was really tough to get out. It took me 3 years to get out. And of course, mentally, I was very, very damaged by
Yes.
then.
Mm.
But what I decided when I did get out, I wanted to have more adventures, but I had nobody to do it with anymore, right? And then I heard about this race in the Marathon des Sables, it was called, a race in Morocco. And it was touted as the toughest race on earth. And I'm, reading about this amazing race where they run 240 kilometers across the Sahara and the Moroccan Sahara. And they have doctors and they have helicopters and they have journalists and they have 9 liters of water a day and they have all of this stuff. And I'm going, what? That's the toughest race on earth? Well, that, compared to what I just been through, that doesn't sound too bad. I reckon I can do this. So I'd never run a marathon. I'd never done anything like that. But I signed up for this race. And then I started to work out how to train for it and went down and did it and had an absolute ball. It was tough. It was hard, but it was nowhere near as tough and as hard as what I'd been through.
Wow.
And I was surrounded by people that were just positive and supportive and telling me how amazing I was doing and I was great and I wasn't useless and terrible and no hope and, all of the things that I've been told for years. And so that really made me addicted, because all these positive people telling me I was doing great is exactly what I needed, right? Because my psyche was pretty smashed up. And so then I got addicted to ultramarathon running. And then I just did one race after the other, and the rest, as they say, is history.
How does the body, I mean, I know our bodies are amazing things, but how do they cope with running for days and days and hours and hours?
I'm so surprised I'm alive. Like, to be honest, when I look back and with the knowledge that I have now of the body and
Yes.
anti-aging and longevity and how to keep yourself well and all the stuff I know now and I study now, I'm horrified at some of the stuff that I did and how hard I pushed it. Back
Right.
then, I didn't have no idea of anything, and naivety is sometimes a bonus because you
Yes.
just bowl on in and you just do. And when you're younger, you do recover, your things recover. I did get a lot of damage and I wasn't able to have children, and I did, have a massive amount of inflammation and kidney problems and, I had a lot of issues. But the body did, recover and respond and get better, and you got stronger from the training. But then you would tear yourself to pieces in the actual races, and then it would take up to 6 months to recover. And of course, when you're doing this back to back, that's when the problems start to rise, and you start doing it for year in, year out, year in, year out. And of course, your hormones. Oh my God, the hormone problems that I developed
Right.
as part of that. I think there was some genetic stuff as well.
Yeah.
So there was definitely damage, but it is amazing what the human body can go through. But I think ultramarathoners tend to underestimate the damage that they are doing and how they are aging their bodies.
Right.
So now I don't do ultramarathons, and that's one of the reasons why now I've retired. Also because I've got mum. And looking after her and running businesses and have other priorities. But one of the biggest reasons that I did give up at the age of 48 was because I knew that I was aging myself, and I was not going to live as long and as healthy as I wanted to if I continued to go at that sort of a level. And I realized too that in your 40s, things started to change, from a hormonal perspective, but also from the exhaustion. It started to add up, all the things that you'd been through in life, and there were some big curveballs in there that you started to get, HPA axis problems and, adrenals, not working like they should be and things like that. And then with the journey with my mum, who had an aneurysm 7.5 years ago, as you said, and suddenly being confronted with the situation and going, she was left with massive brain damage, and the doctors all telling you there is no hope, there is nothing that we can do, basically. Put her in a rest home or an institution. She's 24/7 care, nothing to be done. And I'm just going, I've always been told in my athletic career, it's impossible, you can't do it, nobody's done it, whatever. And I just always have gone, You don't know. You don't know what people are capable of. And I've proven them time and time again wrong in the athletic space. Why not in the medical space? So with, again, that naive and determined, bloody-minded attitude that's motivated by love, I dived into the literature and started to research things and started to come up with my own protocols and my own way of approaching things, including things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy,
which is
keto
incredible.
diet, yeah,
Mm.
functional neurology, everything I studied and stayed one step ahead of her as she started to come back. And the other advantage of being an ultramarathon runner is I knew just how to just put one foot in front of the other. Don't measure, don't look, just keep going, keep grinding. So I knew how to do that, and I did that with her. And we would have months at a time where there was no progress. She was massively brain damaged, so she couldn't sit without flopping to the side. She couldn't put food in her mouth at the very beginning. She couldn't. She had a couple of words that she kept repeating, but no idea what anything. She couldn't speak, no idea I was a daughter, nothing like that. And then slowly seeing her come back, but very slowly. And there would be months when you had no progress. And it was in those months that I just doubled down and went harder and researched more and did more and developed all these protocols. And the hyperbaric was a key factor in her cornerstone of her recovery, because hyperbaric is very powerful for brain injuries and for so many other things, because it hyperoxygenates the body and it uses the body's own healing mechanisms to recover. So it helps with brain healing, helps with wound healing, diabetes, strokes, heart attacks. Pretty much, if you want to know about hyperbaric, I've got a clinic, so come and see me. That's what I do, one of the things I do now.
That's amazing.
But that it took me 2.5 years to get her back to full capacity again. She had her full driver's license, which when I walked into the doctor's surgery with her, and we were ready to get a driver's license. Everyone thought we were mad, including my family, thought it was completely mad that Mum would ever drive again, because she couldn't even drive a wheelchair. And I was determined that she was going to have a driver's license, and she was determined that she was. And this was 2 years into the rehab, where she got her marbles back, so to speak, and she was taking, she was walking and doing little bits. And I went back to a doctor who hadn't seen her in a year, and he knew how bad she had been. And he comes into the waiting room and calls her name, expecting to see her in a wheelchair. And Mum stands up, walks over to him and says, "I'm here to get my driver's license." And he just was just like, "Oh my God, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. You're walking, you're talking, you've come to get your license." He couldn't believe it. He was in tears. And he did all the tests on her, the eyesight tests. She'd got her peripheral vision back even. She had all the reaction tests done. And he said, "Yep, you're good to go. Go in. You have to go and sit your driver's license again with a, test, but you've got permission from the medical perspective. You've got your brain back now to a point where you can be a functioning adult and go and get your driver's license." And so that was huge, and we did that. And we went, and the first time we did the driver's license, she failed the test because she didn't indicate somewhere on a roundabout or something. And so then I went and got an instructor, and she took Mum through some proper lessons.
Yeah.
And then we went back again, and I was devastated when she first failed, because I was like, "Oh no, I've set her up for failure, and now she's been so wanting this, and she's failed." And Mum was just like, "Oh no, we'll just come back and sit it again in a couple of weeks," which we did. And next time she passed and got a driver's license back, which was just absolutely phenomenal for someone who was not much over a vegetative state to be driving a car, having control over her finances again, having control over her life, independent, driving to her friends, and doing all of that.
It's incredible.
Incredible journey.
It's amazing what can be done, isn't it? And when you don't take
no for an answer. No.
I suppose as well. No. And that hyperbaric oxygen just sounds amazing. I wish I'd known about that. I had a beloved aunt that had a stroke. It might have been helpful there,
absolutely,
because she lost the peripheral vision, like
Yep.
you talk about in the book and things like that. So it's just incredible. Just cycling back to the marathons and how you feel that has mucked with your hormones as well. Can we because we have, like, when we're 20 or 30, perimenopause, what's that?
Yeah, yeah.
Menopause, what's that? Oh, we just expect that our bodies will pop out a baby because that just seems to be
That's
the
what you do.
way
Yeah.
that it works. It's only when we delve into it that we find it's a bit more complicated than that, and certainly a lot more complicated with that. And so if you aren't successful with fertility and there is baby loss, menopause actually is, by its very nature, the end of fertility. And there's a grief that comes with that.
Yeah.
So, do you mind if we talk about that? Because I know that's quite a vulnerable
Oh yeah,
share.
and I'm right in the middle of it, Like let's
Mm,
be honest, like I'm 54
right.
and always in complete denial that I'm older. Like I'm Peter
Yes.
Pan, I'm the female Peter Pan, I'm in my own head, and I think that that's actually important that you are young in your head because
Yeah.
and they've shown that in studies actually that if you think you are younger, like biologically younger. However, there are
Mm,
certain things you can't like stop, like menopause.
yeah.
We can slow things down, we can optimize, we can do things to relieve the symptoms of it. For me, it has been a journey of tragedy. We lost one baby to a miscarriage early on, and I met my husband because I've been married before. So my husband now, Hazley, the only one that counts, he's wonderful. I didn't meet him till I was 45. And
Right.
so we started trying immediately, really, because we
Mm,
knew that we were in deep trouble. And we managed to get pregnant, which was against all odds already at that age, right?
yeah.
But unfortunately, we lost our baby at 3 months. So that was the first miscarriage. And then I was like looking into IVF and, that type of thing. And then we looked into surrogacy, and we had a wonderful, wonderful lady who offered to be a surrogate mum for us, which was just absolutely wonderful. Her name was Nicole, and so she got pregnant. We did it ourselves. Won't go into the
Wow.
details. My husband's sperm and her egg, so not my egg.
Right.
And so she was our surrogate, and she got pregnant the first time we did this, and everything was just amazing and wonderful, until it wasn't. And
Mm.
unfortunately, little boy Joseph was born with spina bifida,
Oh,
and he died, within a couple of hours, and it was severe spina bifida.
so
Um,
heartbreaking.
it
Mm,
was absolutely heartbreaking, and it was to hold your baby, this beautiful
mm,
little boy,
mm,
um, just absolutely mind-boggling
mm.
pain,
I'm so sorry.
and for her to have her go through that as well,
Yeah.
um, and for my husband to know that that was probably our last shot.
Mm,
um, it was really doubly hard, and and it was just crazy. It's just one of those things that happens. I mean, her children before had been healthy. She's had another one since, and that one's been healthy. So just bloody bad luck, really. And that's taken a lot to get. You don't get over it, really, do you? You just carry on and
no.
you function.
Yeah.
Um, and then to go into menopause, and then I was going to go through IVF myself, and they said, look, you're actually so fit and so strong and so healthy, you can carry. And I'd had a big bout with fibroids in the middle of that as well. So at that time when we had the surrogate mum, I couldn't carry because I had massive fibroids. And then
Right.
we got on top of that. That's another story in itself. And I was then able to carry. So then they said, well, you can carry. And then COVID happened. So I got another
Oh,
egg donor, and then COVID happened, and that just shut everything down. And then now I'm 54, and I've got mum, who's got
yeah.
severe, she's full time. She's doing well, but she's still a lot of work. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really too late now. They said they would do it up to the age of 55, but I
Did
haven't got it
they?
yet. Yeah, up to the age of
Wow.
55. And then after that, I would have to get special, dispensation. But I'm extremely fit.
Yeah.
So they were quite happy for me to do that. But I've lost the egg donor now. And
Oh,
so, we just doesn't seem to be on the cards for us.
mm,
Which is, I think the hardest thing for me is knowing that my husband would be such a wonderful dad.
mm.
And because he's gone out with an older lady, because I'm older than him,
Oh, are you?
I call him my toy boy. He's like
Mm,
10 years younger than me. He'll never have that opportunity, and that saddens me immensely.
right.
That's, I think, the hardest thing that I sort of have to deal with on that front. I can sort of accept it for myself, but really
Yeah.
hard to see him not have that opportunity to be the wonderful dad that he would be.
Mm,
And then you try and reconcile it in your head. Well, it's the world's in a pretty messed up state.
yes.
So do you want to bring a child in here anyway? And you try to justify to yourself to the point where you can function and cope and get on with things that you have to, because you don't have a big choice in the matter, really.
It's a lot to come to terms with, though.
Yeah,
It's
and
a
I
heavy,
don't think I'm by any stretch of the imagination through the grieving process. I think it's still there's still always that little bit of hope, even though it's ridiculous. I still cycling-ish,
mm.
and
Oh, really?
yeah.
Wow.
So I'm still in the middle of the menopausal changes.
Right.
So I
Mm.
might get a period every 3 months or so. But it's long gone, really. But you had that little bit of hope. A
Yeah.
little bit of hope still lives in your head.
Yeah. I
And
don't
it's
know that it
ridiculous.
ever goes away,
No,
actually.
I think, and now I'm like relying on the scientists going, hurry up with your longevity and anti-aging stuff and reverse the aging
Yeah,
clock. So then I
because
can go
that will
back and do it
happen.
again. It
That
will
will
happen,
happen.
actually. Um, yeah, I mean, on that front, I am very much up on the science on all of that sort of stuff, and they will be able to do that type of thing. Whether that will be allowed and
Mm,
stuff is another,
mm.
the ethics of all of that. I don't know, but
It
yeah,
would
you
be
never know.
interesting to know, to have studied you from back in your 20s to now and see, because you are very fit, but then you've done those really massive, the bodily taxing things,
Yeah,
to see how that has all affected your hormones. Because you work with DNA and epigenetics, right?
epigenetics. Yeah,
So
yeah,
if you bring that into your hormone and menopause and, you know, the evolution of women,
yep.
basically. So how does that work? Can you explain epigenetics?
Yeah, so I do a lot of health coaching like you
Yeah.
do, and I sort of focus in on DNA and epigenetics as one part of the stuff that I do. Also do Dutch testing and thyroid and all of that sort of jazz as well.
Hmm.
But I love the genetics to give us information about what genes are at play and how are they expressing. So I have two programs that I'm using. One is called Epigenetics, and Epigenetics is looking at your genetics, but also how those genes are actually expressing, because genes are a bit like light switches that can be turned on and off by the environment. So you may have inherited from mum and dad your genetic blueprint, but you may have a predisposition to certain things, but because you're not exposed to a negative and bad environment, those things never happen because you never turned on those switches, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Mm.
So that's epigenetics. How does the environment influence which genes are turned on and which are turned off, for the simplified explanation? So if I give an example, every day, all day, we are flipping switches on our epigenome. So if I go into a sauna and I start sweating, I've just turned on a cascade of different genes that are then creating proteins and doing different things in my body, sending instructions out to change my physiology. For example, the sauna, if I go into the sauna, the genes that regulate the BDNF, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, are all upregulated, and I get more of that BDNF, which helps protect my brain. One of the reasons why sauna is really good for people, to combat against neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's, that type of thing. It's also causing you to sweat, which is detoxing your body and getting rid of some stuff. It's helping with heat shock proteins, which is the folding of proteins that the body makes, hundreds of thousands of different proteins, and these all have to be perfectly folded like little origami things, structures, and the heat shock proteins make sure that those structures remain properly folded. I probably butchered the science there a little bit, but in essence, that's sort of what's happening.
I
So
didn't
we're
know that.
tuning. Yeah, we have. It's one of the hallmarks of aging is the misfolding of proteins. So the proteins in our body start to get folded wrong. So if you can imagine a sheet that you've folded and put in your cupboard, well, this sheet's got, it's not been folded correctly, and it's not nice and tidy and neat and doing what it should be doing. And then it causes damage in the body because it's folded incorrectly. So things like sauna can help with that. And there's I think at last count there was 13 different hallmarks of aging, different things, areas that we can attack to try to slow down the aging process. And that's one of the things, that misfolding of proteins. So epigenetics is basically giving you a lifestyle framework to what to eat, right down to each of the single foods that will be good for you, not your neighbor, but for you, when to eat, the circadian rhythm that will suit you. Like, should you be eating early in the morning, or are you better to have yours at lunchtime, or how often should you eat? Are you someone who should only eat once or twice a day, or are you somebody who has a shorter digestive system and they need to eat 4 times a day, maybe 5 times a day, smaller meals? Do you have a predisposition to not having enough digestive enzymes, and we need to support that because you're likely to have, nutrient deficiencies if you don't get that support? Everything, mood and behavior, immunity, cardiovascular, fertility, and as far as the hormone cascade and things go. That's going more into the DNA testing, which I do, which looks at what genes you have in relation to your hormones. And this is very insightful, and I would love to have every young lady do this, because then you'd be able to know what you might be heading for. So as a young girl, I had problems with my periods, very, very heavy periods that would last 1 or 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh my
now
goodness.
know, I now know that I probably had endometriosis. It was undiagnosed. What did they do? They stuck me on the pill. Thanks very much. The pill, while it gives us freedom from having to have children we don't want to, which is definitely our right, we have to have informed consent of what the pill does to our body, and that was not the case back then, of course. And now we know that the pill does a lot of bad things in the body, damaging the gut lining and changing your chemistry of your brain so that you may pick the wrong partner, right down to that level, all these sort of things that are now coming out in the woodwork years later. And of course, 85% of the world's female population has been on or is on the pill.
Yes.
And so we've just done this massive experiment on women. And I was on the pill for years and years and years because I had problems every time I came off. And when I was on the pill, it masked it all, but it was a Band-Aid on a festering wound that then came out later. So when I tried to have children later, that's when I ended up having adenomyosis and fibroids
Right.
and all of that sort of jazz happening. Now,
A lot of those are estrogen driven too, the
exactly.
fibers.
And this is
Yeah.
where the DNA comes in. We can look at your CYP17A1 gene, for example, which tells us how much hormones do you make just from the get-go. And then do you convert it via the CYP19A1 very quickly into estrogens, or do you keep most of it as testosterone? What type of testosterone do you have, DHT or the normal testosterone? How do you process it out of the body? So all of these aspects of that hormone cascade we can see in the genetics. And then we can also see when we combine the genetics with something called a Dutch test, dried urine
Mm.
test of complete hormones, then we can have a look at, okay, this is what your genetics tells me that you're probably doing. And then here's a snapshot of how you're actually expressing right now. Are you methylating properly? Have you got
Mm.
nutrient deficiencies and therefore it's backing up in the system? Are you producing the inflammatory type of estrogen as opposed to the less inflammatory type, the 2 hydroxy estrogen, or are you producing more of the 4 hydroxy, which is the more damaging one? All of these aspects, and we can know. Now, if I'd known that when I was young, I would have been able to go, okay, you definitely shouldn't be on the pill.
Mm.
I had a fast CYP17A1, which meant I made a lot of hormones, which means I went into puberty at 12, which back then was quite early.
Yes.
Not
Mm.
now, because we have phytoestrogens in the environment and our
Mm.
children are going through earlier and earlier puberty, which is a bad thing.
Oh, yes. Mm.
Yeah. And then I produced quite a lot, I converted quite a lot into estrogens, and I had quite a lot of estrogen dominance situation as well as testosterone
Right.
dominance. So I had a bit of the both things. And some of that was good, great for athletic stuff, for to having a little bit more testosterone. Not so good for the odd hair popping out where it shouldn't, or those types of things.
Yeah.
And so now I've got it all sort of. I understand where my genetics are at, and I adapt my lifestyle, my supplementation, and I'm on hormone replacement as well.
Mm.
But the supplementation, hormone replacement is a double-edged sword. It's good in some
Yes.
cases, it's not in other cases, and it needs to
Certainly
be on
not for everyone.
it's a
Mm.
personalized thing.
Mm.
And this is where MenoMe, of course, comes in, and why I interviewed you for my show, because I want people to have those alternatives, to support them through this whole menopausal, perimenopausal time. If they don't want to do HRT, and even if you are on HRT, then that can be a beneficial thing as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah, so
Mm.
you can be on both.
Mm.
So it's a very complicated and nuanced conversation, which we
Cool.
don't have time for today.
Yes.
But yeah, I love doing that sort of stuff and helping people. It's like getting a user manual for your body as opposed to Jane's body next door, because you're
Mm.
an individual and you need to eat for you and exercise for you and hormones for you.
Yeah, we are all so different, and it's so wonderful that people can learn that, can discover that, because, I think for so long people have gone along and thought if they do what their friend Mary's doing, then
Yeah,
that's going to work for them. But
it
it's
doesn't.
not, because we are also bio individual, aren't we? But one of the things too with menopause, perimenopause, and menopause, I always feel it's important to talk about perimenopause
Mm,
as well as menopause, post-menopause, because they are quite different parts of the transition.
yeah, absolutely.
And quite often, and I think this comes as quite a surprise to a lot of people, but this will go back to the epigenetics as well, is that we do need to give, oftentimes, not everyone, but oftentimes our lifestyle and our diet a complete overhaul. And
Amen.
sometimes
Yeah.
that's not easy. And I wrote a wonderful paragraph from your book, actually. Well, I wrote two, but I think it's really important. You wrote, people so often have a try of something and expect immediate results. They want to walk into the gym and walk out with the perfect body. They want shortcuts and the easy way out.
Yep.
Too many are searching for the magic pill, the silver bullet, that, in my opinion, doesn't usually exist. Unfortunately, some people aren't willing to put in the hard work and reap the real gains. Natural therapies, having a good diet, adequate hydration, and exercise just don't work that way. They take time and persistence. And that is so, so true.
Yep.
And I think, I always talk about with the people I work with, baby steps. If
Yeah.
you can make little incremental baby steps, because it can be very, very hard to change the habits of a lifetime, or change that nightly wine that you love, or that daily caffeine fix that you love. And for some people, they're fine. They're not going to be affected by that. But for others, they are. and also it puts a bit of a load on the liver, which doesn't
Totally.
help with that estrogen
No.
methylation, that bad
Yep.
estrogen
Estrogen,
methylation.
you get more estrogen dominance then.
So
Yep.
I know you are a fan of SMART goals. What tips would you give for our listeners if they were needing to make a few changes but were finding it difficult?
Yeah, I love that baby steps. I have another one. There's a book out. What's it called? It's about stacking tiny habits.
Oh, is that James Atomic
Jay,
Habit?
yeah,
Yeah,
Atomic Habits. That's the one. And
James
I think,
Clear.
yeah. It's a very important to make micro changes and not
Mm,
to do it all at once.
mm,
So, and this is, one of the things as a coach and a consultant, I'm sometimes struggling with. I've got limited time. I want to download as much information as possible, but then often I think people sort of go analysis by paralysis, like overwhelm and do nothing.
yeah.
Um, and so I'm trying to change the way I approach that, and have more of a hand holding process, and have another coach that I work with now that does a bit more of the hand holding stuff, because I'm like, dump, here's all the information, and then go and see Sally. She'll take you through the process one step by step, and I'm off to the next thing, because that's how my brain functions, right?
Yeah.
But just building little tiny habits into the day and routines. We're very routine animals. So if we every time we create a habit in our brain, it takes, well, they say it takes about somewhere between 30 and 60 times or days to create a habit.
Yeah.
But every time you're doing it, it's becoming less willpower and more just automatic. And so the first couple of weeks are pain in the butt as you try to change something. So focus in on one thing that you're trying to change. It might be like, I'm going to go to bed at 9:30 every night, regardless. That's the only thing that you're
Boom.
changing. Yeah,
That's a great habit to
you
get into.
focus on. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And you focus just on that one change. You don't try to do that plus that plus that plus that. You try to do that one thing, and maybe you set, you're focusing in on the sleep routine, and it culminates in the 9:30 going to bed. So that might be, the blue light blocking glasses and powering down and doing a bit of gentle yoga at night and chamomile tea and maybe some magnesium and things to calm the nervous system down before you hop into bed, and, those types of things. And then having a dark room, all the stuff that I do for sleep. But it's actually all related to that one thing. I'm going to bed at 9:30, or I have a very strict routine in the morning. I find my willpower is much better in the morning. My brain function is much better in the morning. So I try to do my interviews and my work in the morning. I try to get outside into the sunlight, and I stack these little habits. So before I even get out of bed, I've taken my HRV measurements. I know what my sleep cycle app has told me, if I've had a good sleep, so that I know whether I'm ready for a big day of training, or I need to back off. I'm not so good today, and I need to just take it a little bit easier. So reading your body, and then I go and have a cold shower. Then I jump on the trampoline. Then I do a couple of minutes of yoga. Then I go and do my whole morning routine of supplements, and which for mum takes an hour.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
it's a
Mm.
massive, I'm like a mad scientist in the laboratory putting your stuff together. But we've been through a cancer journey, which we probably don't have time to get into today, and therefore it's a very extreme protocol. But that's my morning, right? So I have that all stacked up, and my routine is set that way, and it's now automatic. At the beginning, it was really hard to do those things, but it comes easier and easier and easier, because
Mm.
of the neural connections in our brain become like a highway. The first time you do it, it's like you're bushwhacking through the bush and creating a path. But the second time, the path's a little bit, you can see it a little bit, and then the third time and the fourth time, and then it just becomes easier and easier. And then it's no longer willpower, it's just an automated robotic thing that you do, just like brushing your teeth. It just becomes something that you subconsciously do, and then it's easy. And
Mm.
then, away you go. So, and I think, to your point about when you get to your 40s, you need to change up. Your hormones are changing,
Yeah.
and it's not to say that we're weaker, more useless, getting older, anything else. It's just that I need to approach my training differently.
Mm.
Again, I go back to the genetics. My genetics, when I did my own genetics, it came back I should be doing much shorter training sessions, and they should be a mixture of high intensity, explosive type of stuff like CrossFit and interval training, as well as calming yoga, Pilates stuff that calms the nervous system down because I'm very hyper. Got a lot of adrenaline, got a lot of stress hormones. So I need to get it out, but then I need to calm myself down. So that's my perfect regime. And when I did that and stopped doing the hundreds of hours of long running, my health just went like it was just night and day. I was so much healthier, leaner.
Yeah.
Like I was fatter when I was doing the long distance running
It's
than I'd ever
amazing, isn't
been.
it?
Yeah,
Mm.
doing yoga,
Cortisol.
Pilates, yeah,
Mm.
cortisol. I was just cortisoled up the wazoo,
Mm.
and I was always carrying a good, 3-4 kilos. It wasn't huge, but I was 3 or 4 kilos. And for someone who was exercising like a maniac, I was just like, what gives?
Mm.
Why am I getting fatter by doing cardio to the extreme? Now I know why,
Body's gone into survival mode.
Exactly. It's holding on to everything it gets because it doesn't know if it's going to need it.
Aren't they incredible machines, our bodies?
We are. And
Mm.
it makes sense once you know what you know. And
Mm.
it just drives you mad when you don't know what you don't know and you've spent 20 years trying to run off the fat.
Mm.
But you were told, you must be eating really, really badly or doing something that you should be a stick. And then you watch other runners and they are
Mm.
skinny. So why? But that was my genetics. My
Yes.
genetics are not set up for that. Other people's are.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're so lucky to live in a time where there is that science
Oh,
and
and
that
it's
knowledge.
improving day
Mm.
and day.
Mm.
It's just
I mean,
stuff
our
coming through.
knowledge, we live in the time of information, don't we? Um, our knowledge is doubling or something every, what is
Every
it?
4 years, I think.
Yeah,
It's getting faster. Now AI's here. Oh God knows.
I
I'm
know.
scared of that.
Yeah.
Scared, but learning and leaning into it because it's coming anyway. So
But there's this incredible thing I saw on Instagram the other day. It was the Today Show put it on. I shared it on my Instagram. And it was, Katie Couric, the well-known television presenters on the TV show in the United States.
yeah,
And I think it was in the 90s. And they were talking about how the internet was coming and how it was weird and how it was never going to take over their lives. And, they probably wouldn't let
famous
you.
last
It
words.
was hilarious.
Yeah. And
Mm,
that's exactly we're in another moment like that
yeah,
in time right
we are.
now with the
Mm,
AI. And
mm,
you can scream and shout and go, I don't want this and this shouldn't happen and it's we didn't ask for this,
mm.
which yeah,
It's
it's
going to
all true,
happen.
but it's going to
Mm,
happen anyway. So you
mm,
better get prepared and
mm,
you better
mm.
work out how it's going to affect your job and your livelihood, and you better adopt it
Yeah.
faster than everyone else because if you don't get at least the first mover advantage,
Yeah, you
you're going to
get
be left
left
behind.
behind, you get lost. That's
Yep,
amazing.
like our older people now, like mum doesn't know how to turn a computer on.
Yeah.
She's lost, like if she can't pay a bill
Mm,
because she can't use online banking,
mm.
like the older people are just so, I just think it's terrible how we've taken away, being able to pay in cash or go to the bank or, like we've just left a whole generation in our wake. And if they don't have children that can look after them,
I know. That's the scary thing.
terrible. Yeah. And that'll be us with the
Yes.
AI if we don't keep up,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I think I've taken up enough of your busy time because you're really hard to nail down. So I know how
I'm
hugely busy
sorry, I
you
am
are. And also looking
mentally.
after your mum and running businesses and, it's a lot.
It's
It's
a
a lot.
lot, and you know what it's like, but and this is why, like, I'm so glad to have meet everybody at MenoMe because they're so generous. Everybody has been so generous because I had a lovely meeting with Lee, and I'm doing something in the supplement space, and she was just so generous with her time and her information, and and this is what it's about: women helping women,
Yes.
or all of
That's
us helping all of us. Like
yeah.
just supporting each other and not being precious with your marbles, so to speak, and
Yeah.
sharing. And I love
And
the
that's what's
team.
great
Yeah,
about you too, so it's wonderful to work with you. But yeah, we're all about women supporting women and
yeah,
being by women for women too, because women understand each other, particularly at this
exactly.
stage of life. And that's not to say
Exactly.
that guys don't. I mean,
No, we
there are
love them.
some
Yeah,
wonderful um, supportive guys out there, I know, but yeah, we do get what we're experiencing.
Yeah, we're the ones in our bodies going through this shit
So
sometimes.
we are very lucky. I mean, we have got a very special team. I have
Yeah,
to
you
say,
have. Yeah, I've got a special team, and I'm very glad to have met you all now, and it's just absolutely wonderful.
and I know I can speak on behalf of everyone else, not just myself, to say that we're happy to have met you too.
Oh, that's
So
so cool.
thank you so much for your time. And let's tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jenna.
Oh,
LisaTamati.com is my website.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, I have a few books out. I've got 4 books. And I have a podcast called Pushing the Limits, which I would love people to subscribe to that. And it's all health, fitness, anti-aging, longevity, how to slow it all down, all of the stuff that we've been talking about today. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And on Instagram at Lisa Tamati, and on Facebook and on YouTube. I have a big YouTube channel as well. So make sure you check out all of those. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. You're everywhere.
I'm
It's great.
everywhere. And I have a hyperbaric clinic here,
Yeah, which
actually
is
on the side of
amazing.
my house. So a little clinic here. So if anyone is in Taranaki district and wants to check out hyperbaric, please, do contact me as well. It would be
That's
great.
wonderful. Well,
Thanks, Jen.
thank you, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for sharing all the vulnerable bits too, because I know it's not easy.
No, yeah. You always end up crying, especially when it's, things like babies,
Yeah.
And you
Mm,
have, like I had a nightmare just 2 nights ago about it, like it just doesn't, it's not like you're over it.
mm,
It doesn't go away, but so many families have been through these types of journeys, horrible
mm,
journeys.
mm.
And the more that we can share and support each other through those, the better, because it's very, very
Understand.
painful. But
It is.
yeah, it's life,
Mm,
isn't it?
mm. But thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thanks so much, Jenna. Lovely to talk.
You